Hi, everybody. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to outline your story that you're going to be writing this week. Your goal with this assignment is to take what you read last week, which was 7th grade, the story by Gary Soto, and write your own story showing your version of 7th grade. Because I know a lot of you said after reading the story, you didn't think certain elements really represented the way you felt 7th grade was like for you, which makes sense because you've had a different experience. So this is your chance to share your experience of 7th grade in a short story you're going to write. So you're going to start by completing this outline. This will just help you organize your thoughts and decide what part of your 7th grade year you want to focus on. So what we're going to do is come here and first just think of some main elements of your story, like some important things to decide about before you start writing. The first one, and maybe the most important one, is to decide what kind of conflict you're going to be writing about. You want to pick some sort of problem to focus your story on. Now, you can take this a couple different ways. If you want to focus on the first day of 7th grade, like the other short story did, that's fine. And in that case, your main conflict might be finding your classes. That could be one. Or being nervous to start 7th grade. Those are both really great options that are closer to the story that you read by Gary Soto. However, you guys also have kind of a cool opportunity here to show a unique experience with 7th grade because you guys have had kind of a weird 7th grade year with the quarantine and with coronavirus. So you could also focus more on being quarantined or online school. This is something that's more unique to you and a problem that it might be really interesting to write about, especially looking back on this time. But decide on your main conflict. Then you're going to decide how did you go about solving this problem, or maybe you're still working on it. So if you're focusing on your first day of school, you might have solved your problem by writing down your schedule to help organize yourself if you were having trouble finding your classes. Or you might have made new friends or realized it wasn't as bad as you thought. Otherwise, if you're focusing more on quarantine or online school, you might be thinking more about what you're currently doing to solve that problem. Maybe you're finding fun things to do. You're brainstorming creative ideas to keep yourself busy. So brainstorming, ways to keep busy. Or if you're having trouble with online school, maybe you're emailing your teachers, asking them questions, going on Zoom, or maybe it's something you're still struggling with. Maybe you're not sure how to solve this problem, and that's also a way to take this story. But this is one of your most important pieces here, deciding what is my problem, what event is my story going to be focusing on, and how am I trying to solve that problem. Now, coming down here, you want to think about who besides you is going to be involved in your story, because there probably is going to be at least one other person who is a main character in your story. For instance, Victor had his best friend as a main character in the story. So for you, maybe you're going to talk about your friends, maybe your teachers, maybe your parents, especially if you're writing about quarantine. So be thinking about that. Who are the characters in your story, and maybe what kind of dialogue are they going to be saying, or how are they going to be included in the story in some way. Setting, you want to be thinking about how am I describing where the story takes place. So if you're doing a first day of school story, it's probably at school. Or maybe you're at home if you're talking about quarantine. But be thinking about how you're going to be describing that setting, and also when. If you're at school, then that's probably something that took place a little while ago, possibly last September when we started. Or maybe you want to talk about the last day we had in school before we left in March. Think about that when. If it's at home, it's probably happening right now, or maybe in April. Last thing I want you to think about is theme. And this is something that you spent some time laying out on Monday in the assignment we had before this. But take your ideas from that document and put them here as well. When somebody reads your story, what do you want them to be getting from it? So, and again, that's going to depend on what your conflict is. If you're looking at that first day of school, you might be thinking more, don't be too nervous about starting new things, because eventually you're going to get it all figured out. Now, if you're thinking quarantine, maybe the theme is making your way through difficult situations. This idea of overcoming difficult things because you can do it. So that's your top chart here. We're just outlining these ideas that you eventually want to include in your short story. Scrolling down, the last thing I want you to do is think of the timeline of your story. And this is something we spend a lot of time talking about halfway through the year or so. But how are you beginning your story? So I'm going to pretend I'm writing about the first day of school. So you might be beginning your story by describing walking into school on the first day. Who are the people you saw? How did you feel walking into the building for the first time? Rising action, this is where you introduce the problem. So it's not the climax. It's not when the problem kind of comes to its biggest point, but you are explaining what the problem is. So again, on that first day of school part, maybe you are starting to try and find your classes, but it's really hard. Or maybe you're starting to feel really nervous about class when you go to your first one. So a great time to do lay out this stuff might be your first class of the day, if you can remember back to then. Now, climax, this is when your problem reaches sort of its top point. So it's the most interesting, most exciting part of the story. So maybe there's a specific moment you remember from that first day where you just felt really like you didn't know what you were doing, or really scared. Maybe the teacher called on you and you didn't want them to. If I did that to you, I'm sorry. Teacher called on you, or you were late to a class because you got lost and late to class, or you weren't sure who to sit with in the lunchroom, whatever it is that made you the most nervous, and maybe had the most emotion behind it, that would be your climax. Following action, that should be when we start seeing the resolution to that problem. So maybe you had a great answer to the teacher's question. Or maybe a teacher helped you find your class if you got lost, or you didn't actually get counted late. Whatever, there we go. Whatever helped you finish or solve that problem. Conclusion, you're just wrapping things up. This is a great place to put your theme, whatever you learned from this experience. So maybe 7th grade isn't so bad. Maybe that's something you learned from this experience. If you remember, that is what Victor learned in the story as well. But this is an example of how to start laying out your story. Again, these are just ideas for where to set your story, but maybe there's a specific event in History Day, or not History Day, in 7th grade that you're more interested in doing than the first day or quarantine. Maybe you do want to focus on History Day, or something else interesting that we did during the year. It's up to you, but this is a framework to help you get started. Let me know if you've got any questions or you want to meet over Zoom to get this figured out for your story.